as we leave journalistic media and go into the internet. Again, the main theme for the broader discussion around free speech is to look at challenges and opportunities through institutions. And so in this panel, we are going to be looking at the role of the internet, whether we're talking about social media platforms or even some of the online streaming platforms that can be used to either promote free speech or squelch it. And for that, we've got a great set of panelists. I'll begin first to my left. Author and journalist, film producer, and director, has also started with her husband a new website called the Unreported Story Society and McElhenney. To her left, Joel Thayer is an attorney and the president for Digital Progress. To his left, we have the creator of the Indirect Message podcast, as well as the YouTube channel focusing on issues of sexuality, culture, and free thought, Lacey Green. And to her left, filmmaker, president of Man of Steel Productions, and SPP alum from the class of 2011, Eli Steele. Please join me in welcoming our panel. Well, as we had in our first panel, we have some diverse perspectives here for this second panel. We have someone here who is quite well versed and can speak on the legal and legislative issues around the internet and free speech. We have two artists, documentary filmmakers in Anne and Eli. And we have someone who I think, no doubt, has the largest YouTube following of any of our panelists in Lacey, with 1.3 million followers on YouTube, as well as a number of other platforms. Again, Lacey Green there. I wanted to start this conversation, again, just a quick reminder, you do have the cards in your folders, and we'll be collecting those as we get a little deeper into our conversation. First, I wanted to begin with the legal and legislative piece with you, Joel. You've been working on these issues both at Capitol Hill and have been looking at the issues around the internet, which for many in thinking about free speech and the internet are thinking about legal issues. Talk just a little bit as you introduce yourself about the work that is being done both legislatively and from a legal standpoint around free speech and big tech.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. As Pete noted, I'm the token lawyer on the panel, so everything here does not constitute a legal arrangement between us. Just follow up with your own attorney. But no, I appreciate the question. I appreciate you bringing us out to discuss this. I find it actually incredibly nice to be out of the Beltway having these conversations, because for far too long that they've kind of been the concentration of this interplay between technology companies and free speech or First Amendment concerns. And I would like to, as any attorney, I'd like to start off with our terms. And first, I think that there was a lot of talk about what the First Amendment protects, but there's not a lot of conversation on what the First Amendment, what doesn't constitute First Amendment protection. So I brought a list. So the First Amendment does not protect obscenity, fighting words, defamation, child porn, perjury, blackmail, incitement to imminent lawlessness, true threat, solicitation, and almost all forms of harassment, provided that there are certain ins and outs in all of these. So that's my last caveat of the day, I hope. But with that table set on what the First Amendment doesn't protect, now let's talk about the framework of how I sort of view the legal and legislative landscape. One is that and I'm going to roadmap. Sorry, that is just how my brain works. So I like to break this down to 3 individual factions. One is the question of diversity of institutions, which you heard a little bit about on the panel, but more in the media landscape, not necessarily in the big tech landscape. Then these concepts that get thrown around a lot without much discussion, which is the publisher versus conduit of speech dichotomy. And then lastly, public squares, and why are they important, and what does big tech have to do with the public square? So on the first end of things, on the diversity of institutions, really we have to talk about whether or not there is a market concentration. And a market concentration, not even just on a layman's level, is how many companies are there that handle data? How many companies are there that handle information? And I'm sure that my libertarian friends would probably say, oh, there's oodles of them. But in all reality, that ignores how this market is actually structured. This market is very vertically integrated. And what that means is that a smaller company depends on a larger company. And frankly, they're on the horizontal end of things, there are really only 3. And that would be Amazon, Google, and Meta. I mean, you can count Apple, but Apple is kind of its own type of monopolist in its own way, particularly as it relates to app stores. But I guess you can call it a duopoly, but because Google also controls that. But I digress. So that market concentration already tells you that there is a limited amount of folks who curate information for you. Here's another issue as well. These institutions also have a lot of statutory protections, and to help them not only advance their own particular perspectives, but to further concentrate their own market dominance. And I, of course, am speaking. And someone asked what is a trigger? What a trigger word might be. Section 230 might be a trigger phrase that I think that the moment you say it, everyone gasps. At least in my circles, which clearly are nerdy. So those are the 2 first components that you have to talk about. That there's very much lack of diversity of institutions. Secondly, this publisher versus conduit of speech issue. Well, okay, a publisher is what you would all imagine. What I think we just saw a group of folks who represented publishers. We saw someone from Newsweek. We saw someone from the Wall Street Journal. We saw someone from the Atlantic. Those are traditional publishers that have specific rules and specific guidelines as to what they can host or not host, or if they take something down, they are held accountable in some way, shape, or form. A conduit of speech, however, is a little bit different. So, intro another trigger phrase: common carriage. So, a common carrier. A common carrier essentially is like a telecom company, or like your Verizon's, AT&T's, Comcast. Who's out here now? Is it Charter? It's probably Charter. Spectrum. There we go. Spectrum. Well, that's Time Warner. And then you also have like Telegraph. So basically, they are neutral platforms. They are not there to curate anything. They are there to get message from point A to point B. That is their job. That is all they are meant to do. Now, here's an interesting thing. The law and a lot of the statute, one of the statutes I mentioned earlier, are blurring that line. I'm sorry, I'm using my hands a lot of Hispanic, so if I accidentally hit you, I apologize. It wasn't intentional. So the issue that you do run into is that the law has sort of blurred these lines a bit. So at one end, you'll hear companies like Twitter or Facebook say, "We're not publishers. No, we're like a dartboard. People throw stuff up there, and we have no control of it." But then, and the reason they do so is to get Section 230 protections. Right. And then when someone says, "Okay, you're not following your Section 230, you're not following the mandates under Section 230, which is curate in a good faith way," they'll say, "Whoa, whoa, 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 buddy, we're a publisher," and everyone turns their head as if they got whiplash. You are, and then and courts say, yeah, they're both. That has very much complicated this entire legal issue. So this melding of these 2 concepts, which are inherently distinct and have inherently different protections, are now given as a windfall to these larger tech companies. And the last bit, I swear I will shut up and let the other panelists speak, is the public square. And why does it matter? I'll tell you why it matters. It matters because public squares have an accountability to the public. That where these companies who have now sat at the I would say, the pinnacle of a lot of our speech debates, have basically ignored any objectivity and also any real responsibility to the discourse, the debate, the meaningful exchanges of ideas. And the question is, are they? Well, I would tell you the Supreme Court certainly thinks so. Justice Kennedy in the Packingham case outright called companies like Facebook a digital public square. Justice Thomas, or as I call him, Mr. Concurrence, wrote two concurring opinions, one calling them out as calling social media companies as potential common carriers, asking for the legislator to do something about it, and on the other end saying we in the judiciary have very much been the problem here because we have essentially defined Section 230 protection in a too broad of a way. So with that table set, and also these are being debated in the courts right now. There's Texas and Florida that are currently fighting for their own state laws, and we'll see how they do. I think the 11th Circuit has recently ruled in favor of Net Choice, which is the Net Choice and CCIA, which are two trade associations that represent big tech companies, saying that no, it violates their First Amendment, whereas Texas is having a little bit better of a time. We're waiting on the Supreme Court decision as to whether or not the law can go into effect. But with that table set, that is the state of play. And I'm going to drink some water. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. That is a good table set on the legal side, and obviously there are legal policy foundations of discussion. Lacey, I want to come to you. You're in an interesting position given the fact that even though some would say that these social media companies, given Joel's table setting here, are part of the problem, you seem to utilize them quite effectively. You do have over 1.3 million followers on YouTube and on Instagram and other social media platforms. Tell us a little bit about your experience with these social media platforms and how you've been able to create and sustain such a following.
Yeah, I started on YouTube way back when no one knew what YouTube was. Back in probably 2007, 2006, I posted my first videos. And I started making videos about sexuality and healthy relationships. And that was basically the first resource of its kind on the internet that I know of. And so I think I benefited a lot from being in the right place at the right time, using language and talking about issues that were resonating with my peers. And it's been sort of interesting because YouTube allowed me to then go out to do a lot of speaking all over the country. And in this sort of 10-year shift that I think a lot of us saw, where, you know, at one point we're living in a world where free speech is a liberal value, like it's celebrated by liberals, and then all of a sudden it's like, what's happening? We're walking around our words, no one's saying what they think anymore. I saw that unravel really on the campuses that I was speaking at. And increased demands on me with my series. I worked with MTV and Discovery Channel as well, just sort of top-down policies coming in the media. And the students themselves, like suddenly I was being protested by, you know, feminist clubs and stuff. Like I think I have the biggest, or did have the biggest feminist channel on YouTube. So it was just a really bizarre sort of upside down time where suddenly you're starting to see all these signs that the culture is changing. And that's where I really sort of changed direction myself to start. I realized, whoa, hold on, something really weird is happening here. You know, a lot of the issues that I talk about and a lot of conversations that I try to start about healthy relationships and sexuality really don't happen if we can't speak openly, if we can't be ourselves, if we can't bring viewpoint diversity and a lot of different perspectives and belief systems to the table, because relationships and sexuality are deeply personal. And everyone has a very unique experience with it. We need to be able to make space for that. We can't say that you have to view sex this one way and there's only one way to do it right and everyone else is a bigot or everyone else is, you know, needs to be silenced, censored, shut up in some way. So it became a real active problem in my work and in my communities to even talk, to even, how do I speak? You know, I was on NPR's This American Life. They did an episode about what happened to me actually in the college speaking circuit. It was called Words You Can't Say, which is why I thought it was funny that someone asked, what are some of the unsayable words? Well, in my world, it was female and male. woman and man. I mean, that was, how do you teach sex ed if you can't say female and male? That was the type of questions I was asking and having to figure out. So I started talking a lot more about this issue online and noticed that a lot of my allies are conservatives. And that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful, bond. I don't think this should be a partisan issue,
right.
like Mr. George said earlier. So yeah, it's been challenging. It's been really challenging for me to kind of even know what to say or do or how to move through this space anymore. Because I feel like we aren't even using the same words anymore.
Well, I want to get more into your story and talk about some of the content pieces, but just to finish setting the overall panel for the table, I want to bring in the streaming platforms as part of this conversation as well, and two really just terrific artists that are having difficulty in getting their art out into the public square, to pull in the phrase that Joel brings in, are Anne and Eli. Eli, let's begin with you. Documentary filmmaker, most recent and very powerful film, What Killed Michael Brown. Talk a little bit first about, I want to come back to how things resolved, but first tell us the experience of creating a piece of art in this sense, in this case, a documentary around the killing of Michael Brown, and then trying to get it out into the public square via the channel of Amazon Prime.
Let me go all the way up to the point where they came to this.
Yeah.
Okay. It's sort of ironic because we were talking about free speech and everything, and my father, Shelby Steele, and I have been wanting to make a documentary for about 10 years, and we could never figure out the right steps yet. And obviously, we started looking into Ferguson, into Michael Brown. And what was fascinating for us in terms of race relations was you had two versions of the story. And I call the lie basically took off. There was like 3 or 4 documentaries on Amazon, them on Netflix, Hulu, that took the narrative that Michael Brown was executed by Darren Wilson and showed us that, okay, well, we live in the United States of America, let's just make our own version. We'll do our own thing. And so we did, and we spent 2 years on this. And I'm kind of talking about this from an artistic point of view, because when you make a documentary, there are no guarantees. Nobody may watch the film, nothing. So it's a big leap of faith to do it. My father didn't get paid. I get basically paid minimum wage. So it was a 2-year sacrifice to make the film. And when we went into Ferguson, people are getting into the Amazon stuff. What was fascinating was, and at the Bobby was talking about that, the working class was so thankful to have us come because they had been ignored by the mainstream media. Even Jack Doherty put out a tweet that basically said the CNN was doing manufacturing their own version. So these people have been ignored, and we just showed up, interviewed them, and made this film. And so now we have the question of how we get this on the platform. And basically Netflix or the mainstream streaming channels were not an option. They were just not going to put it up. George Floyd had already happened. So that was like 3 or 4 months before. So the pressure was enormous. By the way, we had everybody literally that was associated with the film left and right, one away from us. We were pretty much toxic at that point. What killed Michael Brown? The title was just threatening to people. And I kept saying, no, it's not about Michael Brown, it's about America, it's about the reaction, but people did not want to be associated with that. So I think in September, I was very thankful to have Amazon, because Amazon was actually as a platform. I could go into the Amazon portal, upload my film, follow all the steps, upload the film myself, and then it would go through the vetting process. There were 4 requirements. I can't remember all of them, but basically, violence, maybe even equality or not like you're captioned to conform or something like that. But most of it was like violent, cultural, stuff like that. Pedophilia, just extreme stuff. Obviously, I was not worried about any of that. And the turnaround window was about 4 days. So I was expecting to platform, hear back from them within 4 days. Within 2 days, actually, we got an email that said that the film had been put into content review. So I'm like, okay, content review means the content, not the physical material. Like in other words, I uploaded the film right. This is a lot of things you have to conform to. I passed that test. So content review, and I'm like, okay. And then it kept dragging on. I kept emailing them. It dragged on, and then Naomi's husband, Jason Wiley, knew the film was coming out, so he asked for a copy of the film. I gave it to him, and then he wrote and then he said, "Well, Amazon putting it on," and I'm like, I haven't heard from them. I was getting like emails that were not in proper English. I guess they were coming from overseas. I don't know where they were coming from. So I was like, no, I'm actually, this question you have to give me my answer, blah, blah, blah. So I told Jason all of that, and he publishes his op-ed. Amazon may ban What Killed Michael Brown or something like that. And so that was, and then his piece had come out on Tuesday. That night around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, we get the rejection letter, and it was basically, your film does not meet, your film does not, unfortunately, we have found the title does not meet Prime Video content quality expectation and is not eligible for publishing at the service at this time. We will not be accepting resubmission of this title, and the decision may not be appealed. So I've gotten 99% of the things I send out, I get rejected, and all the rejections are always like, hey, you know what, not quite the right fit for us, or, you know, if you fix that part up, maybe we can do something with it. There's always an open door. This moment, no. Final. So it's a quick thing. We have Vimeo, which is another platform. So thankfully, I was able to drive a lot of people over to Vimeo. But no other platform compared to Amazon in terms of reach, in terms of people able to, like your grandma to your 3-year-old knows how to use Amazon. And that's a tremendous power there.
Well, we're going to get to the rest of the story, but yes, that's a great setup, Eli. And for you as well, you and your husband Phelim have produced some really important documentaries and docudramas. Frack Nation is a great movie, but as we have discussed before, it wasn't until you produced Gosnell that you ran into multi-level problems, not only with the streaming services, but another dimension to the creation of art had been some of the fundraising platforms as well. So talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced from some of these online platforms.
Yeah, we had, I mean, crowdfunding was such an amazing tool for people, for creators, to suddenly get access to funding. Just a brilliant tool, and we used it a bunch of times, very successfully. Including, we did, as Pete mentioned, we did a documentary called Frack Nation, and we raised, I think, something like $100,000 for a documentary from 15,000 people or something. And then we had this idea of making this movie called Gosnell, which was about this abortion doctor from Philadelphia who was in prison for delivering babies alive and then cutting their necks with scissors. And he was in prison for that. He was in prison, he had had a trial, and he was in prison on 3 counts of first-degree murder of 3 individual babies. And so we thought, we're going to make a movie about this because it hadn't been covered very well in the media. Like, the media they really just didn't cover it. So lots of people have literally still never heard of him. I still go places and people have never heard of Kermit Gosnell. And he's America's biggest serial killer. Like, it's not even an argument. And so, you know, people like serial killers. I mean, when do we not love serial killers? And so we don't know about this guy, and he's not in the pantheon. It's a terrible disgrace, actually. So anyway, we decided to make a movie, and we thought we had such a great experience on Kickstarter, which is kind of the preeminent, and that's kind of one of the things with tech. Whoever's in there first, like you, Lacey, getting in first is huge. And the earlier people got in, the better, and stuff like that. And platforms that were early did very, very well. So Kickstarter was the kind of the Apple. It looked really nice. It had it was really good to work with. And we'd had a fantastic experience with them, really good. So we thought, you know what, we're going to do this crazy thing, complete madness, by the way. We're going to ask for more money than anyone has ever asked for before for a movie. We're going to ask for $2.1 million. And we decided to do, you know what they call that, fixed funding. So if we didn't get the $2.1 million within, I think, 40 days, we'd got nothing. So if we'd raised $2 million, we'd have got nothing. Complete nightmare, can I just mention. Anyway, to do this, because we had done this so many times before, there's an enormous amount of preparation that goes into before you go live the first day. You have people set up and you say to them, make sure you give me $500 the first day. You know, people that you know, and you say, look, drop it the first day, so the first day it looks good and all that. So it's a huge amount of preparation. So we were there, we were like, oh, really concentrated on the first day and everything. And we sent our stuff off, it sounds so much like Eli's story, sent our stuff off like 4 days in advance. We knew it was fine. We, you know, sent all the stuff. You've got to upload things and bank accounts, and it's all very correct. Did everything, and then nothing happened, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. And you normally would see the live page, and you'd be able to make some edits and stuff like that. So it didn't happen. And we're like going, this is panicky time now. So we started writing to them, and then we started getting, and I'm glad you made me, because I now got this up on the phone. So we started getting this sort of stuff. So we got, we would ask that phrases like thousands of babies stabbed to death and similar language be modified or removed from the project. We understand your convictions and the horror of this person's crimes. However, we're a broad website used by millions of that means, by the way, like, yeah, whatever, right? Our community guidelines outline that we encourage and enforce a culture of respect. Don't we love respect? Respect and consideration, and we ask that that language specifically be modified for those reasons. We wrote and said, this is nonsense, by the way. Here's the grand jury report that says, you stabbed thousands of babies to death. You know, and we rewrote the script and whatever. The next thing, back again. Script looks good. But phrases like thousands of babies stabbed to death and thousands of babies murdered will need to be removed or modified to comply with the spirit of our community guidelines. Kickstarter, so then we went on Kickstarter and had a good look around. And just for your knowledge, Kickstarter has hosted and promoted 16 projects about stabbing, including the chance to contribute to make Stab 1, 2, and 3. Kickstarter has hosted 5 projects about incest, one a project with a C word in the project description. You know the C word that ends in a T, right? 44 projects about rape, 28 projects with the word F-U-C-K or F-U-C-K-I-N-G in the title, and on and on and on, right? So that's what their community looks like. And this thing, and we've had this conversation before with Eli, this community standards thing is brilliant. Like, it's brilliant. It means absolutely nothing except for what I think, and I'm a 16-year-old pimply boy in Bombay, and I've just seen something, and you know what, we don't like that abortion stuff. We're not having any of that now, you know, sort of thing. So what we did eventually was, we wrote to them and said, we don't want to be part of any platform that doesn't have truth as its first principle. So, right? And so we went to Indiegogo and actually had a very good experience on Indiegogo. But when we got the first $1 million, which, by the way, complete nightmare, I can talk about that at length. When we put up a billboard in New York opposite the Kickstarter offices saying, no, we got $1 million now. So that was kind of one of the first things that happened to us. And that goes way, way back. I mean, I mentioned this to Pete before. This internet problem was common a long time. And people on the right are just, you know, inclined to do the same old thing the same old way forever and ever. And none of this is news. This was happening forever, and it was like, really wake up and smell the roses. The other thing that happened to us during the virus, by the way, do you like that? During the pandemic, we actually did a little daily podcast called The Daily Virus. Do you like that? The Daily Virus. Didn't get 1 million followers, unfortunately. Very unhappy about that. But in one of the episodes, which I thought was really funny, one of the episodes was taken down on YouTube, right, for medical misinformation. So we went and we got it transcribed. And here's what I said on that podcast. The only thing I said basically about the virus was, we have a new variant now called Omicron. And you know what? If you rearrange the letters of Omicron, it spells moronic. And by the way, it does spell moronic. And that is actually factually true. So that was it. That was it. So that video was taken down by somebody who just didn't like the idea, whatever, didn't like whoever. Another example that I've had, and now my Facebook page, my public Facebook, and I just want to say a couple of things about Facebook. Mark Cuban, who I absolutely used to adore, and I hate him now, but anyway, Mark Cuban made a really good point. He's really pissed off with Facebook because he's out of money promoting the Mavericks, right? And on Facebook. And then what they did, when he brought the population in, they started to force him to pay to contact the people he brought in, right? And the only way you could get in touch with them, even though he had this massive community, was by spending ad dollars. Mm-hmm. And he said, buzz off. So I think he's not on Facebook anymore. My small example of this is on my Facebook page, which isn't, whatever number of followers I have. I put up, so we've made a movie about Hunter Biden called My Son Hunter. And it's a movie. Conservatives have a real problem about that. You have to keep saying movie, because they think everything's a documentary. Just mention that, by the way. So it's a movie with actors in it, right? And one of the actors, Lawrence Fox, is the guy who plays Hunter Biden. And on my Facebook page, I put up a photograph of Hunter Biden, actual Hunter Biden, in his lovely underwear, in a strip club. Delightful photograph of himself, right? And beside that photograph, I put a photograph of our actor wearing said same outfit, but totally covered up, by the way. Anyway, I am in really serious trouble. So, the whole thing blew up. Facebook basically said that you know what I've done? It's the sexual exploitation of an adult. There you go. A sexual, and so I now, every time I open my public Facebook page, it says, you be careful, Anne McElhinney, because Anne McElhinney is going to disappear.
I want to come back to you, Lacey, because because there are two things happening, right? At once, this is a discussion around these technology platforms and how they're being used to either as platforms for free speech or squelching free speech, as we're seeing evidence of. But you started in a certain direction with the platform, but have seen fit, given some of your experiences, to take on directly this question around viewpoint diversity. And you discussed a little bit about how you came to this as a subject matter that you wanted to bring up and talk about, some of your tours of college campuses and so forth. But I want to get a sense of how that is now being received on the platform, because you are known for the area of the cultural commentary and the sexuality education. And so this is now new. You've got the Indirect Message podcast. Talk a little bit about how that is now being received by, in some cases, similar audiences who may have come to you for other information.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because it is a little bit of a switch. Yeah. Although for me, like what I'm doing now, talking more about the core values underneath some of this stuff is where it all started for me.
Yeah.
I used to work at the ACLU. Like my time in college was very much involved with the free speech stuff. I went to Berkeley, the whole kit and caboodle. But I see it as coming back to something. And not everyone sees it that way. I would say my audience, the ones who actually even still follow me. Now, I will say there was a mass exodus from my channel at one point when I made it clear that I am my own person, I have my own points of view. I think it's important to respect lots of different opinions. I had a huge internet YouTube blow up because I had publicly made peace with a man who made maybe 100 videos criticizing me. And we went to VidCon together and we sat down, we talked, and we had a few debates online, and not even just him, but a bunch of people. Like there was a group of people, as Dave was mentioning earlier, there was a group of people who were like kind of criticizing the feminists, it was like the warring tribes. And I went to the other side and I said, let's talk. Let's have a conversation about this. Let's try to understand each other. We don't need to just sort of have this constant internet mobbing war. Like, are any of us learning from this?
Yep.
You know, are any of our points of views expanding? And so some people from their camp came to mine. Some people from my camp left and said, that's not what I'm here for, and that's okay. But now, you know, it's kind of a mix. I would say that people that still follow me obviously know what I'm about now.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of growing pains that happen anytime you know, reveal a part of yourself that other people don't like.
Yeah.
And, you know, that sucks and it hurt, but it's also like, they don't owe me anything. You know, you have a bajillion people you can watch on YouTube. I'm not owed anyone's time any more than anyone else. So there is a little bit of backlash. And I will say, coming back to the culture piece with the campuses and stuff, I think I've noticed there's like a few different ideologies, lines of thinking around free speech in more liberal communities. And when they email me angrily, I use that as an opportunity to try to understand kind of the headspace that people are in, and to help them to, you know, kind of peer into what kind of conversation where might I be able to have a connection point with this person. And by the way, I did that with, it used to be mostly religious conservatives who would get mad at me online for talking about sex. And also their messages, you know, while sometimes people's hateful messages are hurtful, of course, they can be a moment to reflect and understand. And that's the nature of open dialogue and free thinking, right? So I'm trying to bring all of that and the shared perspectives. That's what I am trying to do with the podcast, is let's create space, you know, to be compassionate, not to be cruel, not to be needlessly inflammatory. You know, let's be adults. But by the way, the internet, a lot of people on there are children, literally. So there's also the wild card factor, and that makes it hard too.
I want to segue off of that point and come to you, Joel. The old Marshall McLuhan line that the medium is a message. There is something about these online platforms, which we're all very familiar with, that can lend themselves to essentially thoughtless disagreement. And as we're beginning to understand, now that more is being revealed about the cash incentives and or economic incentives that many of these platforms have, they're almost incentivized, or actually they are incentivized in many ways, to extol and promote really rather radical and confrontational behavior. And so talk a little bit about what we're beginning to learn more now about how these platforms operate, and that ipso facto, they're in their very nature, they have created these environments where there is a lack of deliberation and opportunities to really engage, and really quite the opposite. They are creating environments of confrontation and friction.
Yeah, we've heard some of it here, and actually from the previous panel. I think they learned a lot from, you know, traditional media outlets. So I mean, there's a common phrase: "If it bleeds, it leads." And so the idea behind that concept is not necessarily that bad if it's backed up by some facts, and frankly, you have other outlets that can contradict. But that's not really what we see here on social media platforms. And you actually see it with the abortion debate. It's really interesting when you get to the Dobbs decision. You have this outpour of the almost Chicken Little types of responses, and none of it is really grounded in what Justice Alito said. Nothing is really grounded in what the law actually did, and most of them don't even know that Roe v. Wade was mostly gutted by another case called Casey, and somehow that has created this little enclave, or not little, giant enclave of Twitter warriors that have engaged in what most people call mobocracy. And also, social media companies like to amplify this stuff. Why? Because it's eyeballs. It's time spent more on your phone. And I think that I was talking to someone earlier about this relationship between all the reporters who go from the New York Times, they go from all these more liberal outlets to Twitter, Facebook, and Twitter, well, Meta, or however they identify, and Google, and you find out that there's a lot of efficiencies that tech companies have that aren't available to news outlets, and that can be very devastating for a lot of these very broad conversations, such as abortion, such as immigration. So you have, no one knows that, or even January 6th. God forbid that we try to evaluate whether some of the Black Lives Matter movement, mostly peaceful protests, amounted to a riot versus January 6th, where a window was broken. But not to downplay how awful that was, but at the same juncture, you saw a cabal of companies look at particular types of content, amplifying one side and amplifying the other side, and basically just lighting a match and letting whatever fire go ablaze that they saw fit. And to Anne's point, also Lacey's, and actually everyone's point here is that they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to, like, when things get out of control, or things where if they can't control the fire they started, they'll go to individuals and say, actually, it was your fault. You didn't meet our consumer guidelines, and you don't have good quality on your thing, so we're going to take you down. That happened to a company called Parler, where Parler basically was a free speech app that just it wasn't conservative. It was just that, hey, we're going to say, you can say whatever you want on our platform, and you know what? We don't really care. But when January 6th came along, well, Facebook, Google, Apple, they all needed a scapegoat. And so even though Facebook had more groups talking about January 6th, they actually had groups that were convening to go storm the Capitol. They get a pass for whatever reason. But Parler, who had no real relationship to galvanizing people, or really didn't even have the member base to support the claim that these people, that Parler itself was responsible for the January 6th, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Event. There we go. I don't want to say protest. That's another trigger word. I think that what you saw was Apple had a problem with it. Apple wanted it off its platform. Apple has a relationship with Amazon. Apple goes to Amazon and says, we give you $30 billion to house some of our stuff. If we can't host it, you can't host it. And then Amazon went to Google, and Apple went to Google, who they also have a relationship with, and say, you can't do it either. One company made the decision to completely wipe off a small business because of some failed sense of morality that you can't actually, no one can actually articulate to me in any meaningful way. But yet, this is the world we're living in. Yep. This is the power we're talking about. This is the shift in the dynamic. So it's dangerous.
Just a shout out here, call for questions. If you have questions of this panel, please write those down on the cards, and they will be picked up by Melissa and or Emily, depending on where you are. Eli, I want to come back to you as we begin to hopefully turn a bit of a corner here into some more positive parts of this conversation. What Killed Michael Brown did make it onto Amazon. And so tell us a bit about the rest of the story, and frankly, what it took after you received that email saying that there will be no appeal. This is not going to appear on our platform for certain community standards, again, or professional standards that were not defined. It's an important film if you haven't seen it. Tell us a little bit about how that changed.
Yeah, it was I'm not gonna lie, it was sort of a shock. I mean, I guess, you hear stories about people being canceled. I grew up in a world. I mean, I was 14, 15 years old. My father was canceled basically in the late 80s. So we lost every single friend, family friend, associated with his university. So I kind of know what that feels like, but still, it doesn't prepare you. So I'm sitting there thinking, we had a cheap budget. I mean, with $500,000, that's not cheap, but for a film, especially for what we were trying to do. And so I was, penny pinchy every dollar because my goal was to save as much money for the release of the film, the PR, the ads, and stuff like that. So obviously, Amazon had presented itself as a platform, a neutral entity. You should put it up, and as long as you don't violate the content, the agreements, your platform, and then you should start your ads, you should run your campaign. So when I got that rejection letter, it was pretty much as if the world kind of crashed down, because how you move an elephant. I mean, when you put your money, how you get it back, how you move it out, how you shift it. So for them to be so cavalier, not even caring about it, that's just, I can't swear here, but that makes me angry to this day that they had that much power. So but in America, when that happens, hopefully there's avenues, and I just pivoted toward Vimeo. The Wall Street Journal really came to our support. My father worked for the Wall Street Journal, so they really backed him up. And I mean, without the Wall Street Journal, we would have been dead in the water. So they published two op-eds. So we had the one on Tuesday. They published one on Friday. Then they published another one. So all that put the pressure on Amazon. This was also the same week that the Hunter Biden New York Post story was had the controversy. So that coming out. Then you had, I guess, the Republican talking about Section 230, where they're going to take away some protection for the internet. So that's all coming down on Amazon. Then the interesting thing was that, if I remember, about 2 years ago, so all the pressure coming down. And I'm just trying to think how we make the money here. Because, I mean, we got to make money in order to get another film going and stuff like that. How you rescue this animal. And so basically all that pressure should push Amazon. They reached out to us, and we had a pretty good conversation. I thought of asking them, well, why did this happen? Why would you do this? You got 3 other films on Ferguson, all telling the point of view of Dorian Johnson, which the media, again, decided to ignore something like 30 or 40 witnesses. For one witness, you have 3 or 4 documentaries on this one. What's the issue with putting hours up as the accounting narrative? Yeah. And he was just like, oh, it was a mistake. Oh, yeah. And it's sort of like, come on, you gave $10 million to Black Lives Matters. Obviously, so this is my take. You got a social justice warrior type of culture inside in the company, but you also have the business side of the company. So I think that the business side came down on the social justice people and pushing back. That's pure speculation in a way. I just thought it based on that call. So Amazon platform and film, I mean, it's just the power. I mean, it's just the power of it. It was just like, wow, okay. And so we got the reach. But the damage was pretty bad in a way. The damage, I think, really, I've talked to other filmmakers about it, is why would you make a film? Mm-hmm. Why would you put yourself in the mercy of pure stranger who don't care? They don't care. They should send you an email and delete you. And then what's the danger to the country if people are saying, you know what, I don't want to make a documentary that's just going down to new ground. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to make echo chamber documentaries. I'm just going to make a documentary for my little crowd over there. Well, then I'm not interested in those documentaries. So it was a big thing for the artistic community and a lot of liberal filmmakers. I mean, I live in LA, so pretty much all my friends are liberal. Who really bothered by that, and they were really bothered by that, especially after they started the film.
Mhm.
They thought it was very human, it was very compassionate, gave voices to the unheard. What more do you want? And isn't that what you guys on the other side are fighting for?
Isn't that the power of that, right? So, and I'll come to you in a second, Joel, because we actually have questions are coming in. We've got a great question to segue off of. But we can celebrate for a millisecond the fact that you got back on, but that message has now been communicated to a broader artistic community, that if you need to rely on these platforms to essentially display your work, would you even start down that road if you had to go through what you've had to go through and what you've had to go through?
Yeah.
And so maybe just a quick response before I come to you, Joel. How do you navigate that for the next project, knowing that you've been through this? Or do you think that now, given what you've experienced, that now Amazon is going to maybe be a little bit more quicker acting on and supportive of the work you're doing? Or do you sense that, I just know that if I continue to go down the road of making provocative art, that places like Amazon are going to continue to make it difficult for me?
Well, I mean, I can state it for the fact Amazon doesn't care about free speech. Their business. What makes Amazon fundamentally very dangerous is they have what they call the AWS. So they control pretty much the whole internet.
Amazon Web
So they
Services.
should turn this off, turn that off, the platform this. I mean, everything on that platform, so that's a huge thing, a huge monopoly on it. And especially to answer your question, I don't know if I could give you a real answer because my father was canceled probably 1992, thereabout. The last piece he ever wrote for the New York Times was like 1999. The New York Times basically asked him to change his op-ed. He said, nah. Went to the Wall Street Journal, so he's been there. But since about 1999, not one of his books could be found in the bookstore. So it's the same thing with What Killed Michael Brown. You're not going to find What Killed Michael Brown on Netflix or anything. So I think you do have to be crazy, and in a way. But I think that I think what my father and I have is that we still have faith. We still have faith that we can do our work. Maybe we're not going to get the reward in our lifetime, but we can still do the work, put it out there. That's all we can do.
Yeah, be true to yourself. I wasn't going to go here, but I think it is worth talking. I had a media interview this morning with some newspaper outlet, and they were asking me, it was a foreign outlet, and they were talking to me about the challenges to democracy, and we got into the subject of free speech. This really is about courage, folks. When we're talking, people here and others in the first panel and the next panel that you're going to see, we need to understand the importance of courage for the times that we're in, and to celebrate it, to support it in ways that we can, because that is going to be the only way through. This moment is going to be when people of courage, or crazy people like you, Eli, and your dad, are willing to do things that, in the natural scheme of things, maybe financial reward or popularity, more broadly understood, are not going to be there for you. And so with that very optimistic look, we did have a question from Cruz Garcia, one of our recent graduates. It seemed, and this goes to you, Joel, it seems as though there has been pushback against censorship with Elon Musk and Twitter, pushback against Biden's quote, Ministry of Truth. What's the likelihood of big tech fostering diversity of thought in the future? What would be your advice to conservative or libertarian students who want to work in big tech or media?
well, first I encourage you to work for big tech media and change the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But short answer is not high. And so this actually pairs well exactly what I wanted to highlight of Eli's talk, which is very important. And that is, we have to stop looking at the internet as a siloed entity. The internet is, we have to start evaluating holistically. Amazon, Prime, all that stuff, all the other companies that do business online is all hosted somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's hosted by some of these major companies. So this game of whack-a-mole that a lot of the folks are talking about, where they say, oh, we're kicked off here, but we can go here, that is narrowing, because ultimately these companies have figured out that the infrastructure is the end game. There are literally 2 operating systems for devices. Yes, there's a couple of others, but really you either have Apple or you don't. And in terms of being on the internet itself, AWS runs 25% of all internet infrastructure. Think about that. Think about if you were kicked off of 25% of the internet, you're dead. So in terms of like, what I would tell a libertarian student, wake up. Libertarians have and for those who don't know what libertarian view is, and granted, I wrote a whole piece on this called The Damnable Inklings of the Big Tech Libertarian, where I essentially argue that libertarians' free market arguments are BS. They're BS because there is no free market, because they have a great answer for overregulated markets, and that's where they found a world to live in within the conservative discussion. But when it came to absolutely no regulation, they can't tell you anything. Their view on tech is tantamount to a meme where it's a dog sitting at his computer. The entire office is on fire, and they just say everything is fine. That is how they view some of these policies. So if I were to tell folks, I would say evaluate the market honestly. Look at the internet holistically. Don't look at individual markets and try to silo one market over another market without understanding that there are externalities, there are network effects, and if you look at it that way, you'll start seeing that there are monopolizations happening over our free speech. There are monopolizations happening over data management, and so this is where antitrust laws become incredibly important. This is how you should more appropriately evaluate it. And if you want to talk about consumer welfare standards, which is something else, that's a vague term that just means that in antitrust policy, we value the benefit to the consumer and innovation to the consumer. I ask any libertarian this question. Since the start of Google search and the amount of data you initially gave to search, have you actually received more innovation given that in today's search, given that you give your geolocation, you give virtually wherever you give what you eat on a day-to-day basis, what you say on a day-to-day basis. You get visual. You basically give them your pictures. What innovation are you getting from that search? Am I actually the fact that I'm getting if I Google a cat pic? Is the fact that I'm getting it from 0.0001 seconds to 0.111 second that much of an innovation? Or is it just more of the same thing and you're asking more of us? This is a question that I think libertarians have a problem answering. So there's no economic model that supports libertarians. They should get out of that, come to the conservative movement, and let's have a talk.
So last couple of minutes here, and I'm not going to hit everybody here on the way out, but it's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to, but it's directed at you, Lacey. Could you please speak about the adpocalypses on YouTube and their effect on our discourse?
Yeah, so that was, thank you for that question, because I was like, I haven't really talked about the actual platform side of this. So Adpocalypse, for those of you who don't know, was around 2017, 2018. And basically there was a big YouTuber, the biggest at the time, PewDiePie, posted a video that had some kind of unsavory content in it. I won't go into detail, but basically questionable, but probably should be allowed to be on the platform. And a ton of advertisers pulled out billions of dollars. And this had a huge effect on all YouTubers because the amount of views that you get and the amount of times your videos are served is related to how monetizable it is, which is a little bit of a problem, but that's a different issue. So a ton of people lost their income overnight. They lost a ton of their viewership overnight. And it just sort of illustrated kind of what you were saying, Eli, like there's an enormous amount of power concentrated in these platforms, and you know, at a moment's notice, everything can change. And on YouTube, there are hundreds of thousands of people who make their livelihood there now. Mm-hmm. Not just YouTube, but like all these platforms, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. I mean, all these filmmakers, tons of people making money online. So Adpocalypse, I think, was a cautionary tale about the marriage between big tech and ads, and how sort of fragile a lot of the content creators, the fragile ground that we're all walking on. Mm. And that we do need stronger protections. And also, I don't know what to do about the business side, because, if they don't want to have their ad on a thing, they don't want to have their ad on a thing. Right. So I'm not really sure what to do about that. Right. But it is something that should start a conversation at the very least. And that maybe a platform like YouTube could say, we are a free speech platform. We encourage diversity of thought and viewpoint. And when you advertise with us, that's what you're getting, right? And if they stood up to the advertisers and made that clear too, so that everyone's on the same page, maybe that could have helped with Adpocalypse. Mm. And also maybe these ads shouldn't pull out over one YouTuber. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's nuts. That's pretty wild.
And we'll conclude this panel with you. Is there anything that you're hopeful for? Are artists becoming more aware? I'll ask the same question that I asked Eli.
I was hoping you weren't asking me for the hopeful part of this.
Well, just to say that, if it is going to be delivered via one of these streaming platforms, why do you continue to develop provocative art knowing that you're going to have these challenges?
Because it's really important to tell the truth, and it's really important to tell stories that aren't getting reported. I mean, it's very frightening that we're living in a world where extraordinary things happen and people don't know they happened. And there's something very chilling about that. I mean, the Hunter Biden thing is beyond belief. It's beyond belief that a story that went into the New York Post, one of the oldest newspapers in America, was very effectively, extremely effectively censored. And in the Gosnell story, in a smaller case than that, we're not stopping. We're definitely not stopping, and we just have to get very clever. I mean, one thing that wasn't said here that I think is really important, and not everyone maybe understands that, but the conservative movement are paying huge, massive, gazillions of dollars to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Does everyone know that? Does everyone understand that? So every large conservative organization that is spending $5, $10, $25 million they hand over year after year. Do you know that, right? Does everyone understand that? And it's like, so we're paying these people to destroy us. We're paying for it. And by the way, I'm part of it. I've done it. We've done it. Because if you put something out there, you have to promote it. And you promote it, you give them money, and then they can say, you know what, whatever. And it's even worse than that. You could put, and this is something that we'll be facing when we're putting the Hunter Biden movie out, we could put that Hunter Biden movement, because we did it through our 501c3, so we want to make it freely available as quickly as possible. We could put that on YouTube. We could spend a shed load of money on advertising, and after we've spent the money, they could take it down. They could just notice something. They could get a complaint from one person who was offended by what was I doing? Sexual exploitation of an adult. There's a lot of sexual exploitation of adults, I'll tell you, in that film. But so hopeful. I'll tell you what I think is hopeful. I think that the recent communication by Netflix to their workers saying, if you don't like it, find another job. I thought that was amazing. And I think people like Dave Chappelle, they're the ones that's going to break everything, because he's too big. He's got, sorry, I'm going to do it. He's got money. And he has also of talent. And he's at a level of talent and money.
Yes.
He's got a level of talent and money that they can't destroy. He's too big for them. He's just too big. And that's really great. Yeah. And Netflix realized that. They thought, we just don't want to go on without him.
Right.
And I think that was amazing. The other guy, Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is another version of that. He's too big. He's too big, and they don't understand it, but they can't live without him. And they're basically saying, as you said, it's extraordinary the amount of people he has. But I mean, the conservatives are very disappointing to me. How we're always so on the back foot. Why did no billionaire, gazillionaire conservative buy one of these massive platforms? Why didn't they buy? Why doesn't Elon Musk buy the? I love that somebody tweeted that. Why doesn't he buy the New York Times and make it into a newspaper? Why did conservatives do the same thing the same way all the time and let the culture? Like we make plays. We did a Ferguson play, and the theater. The theater, closed us down. 6 of the actors walked out. They don't like us being in that space. But my God, that should be the very incentive for us to get right in there.
Please join me in thanking our panel.